Imagine driving home late at night, only to realize you're not alone, and your unexpected passenger isn't alive. Stay with me as we explore chilling encounters and ghostly tales that will haunt your thoughts long after the video ends. The Phantom Hitchhiker of Route 44. What would you do if the same eerie figure kept appearing on a dark road, even inside your car? In Rehoboth, Massachusetts, Route 44 is notorious for sightings of a phantom hitchhiker. One foggy evening, Sarah, a nurse returning from a long shift, was driving along the desolate road. The thick mist made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Suddenly, her headlights illuminated a man standing by the side of the road. He wore a red flannel shirt and jeans, his face partially obscured by the fog. Against her better judgment, she slowed down and rolled down her window. Before she could ask if he needed help, the figure vanished. Heart racing, Sarah hit the gas, determined to get home as quickly as possible. But a few miles down the road, there he was again, standing in the exact same position. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel. Desperate to shake the unsettling image, she drove past him without stopping. Just as she thought she was safe, Sarah glanced in her rearview mirror, and there he was, grinning eerily from the back seat. The car swerved as she screamed. When she regained control and looked again, the seat was empty. She later learned that many drivers had reported seeing the same man, a ghostly figure said to have died in a car crash on that very stretch of road. Would you dare drive down Route 44 at night, knowing that Sarah's phantom hitchhiker might be waiting? The haunted dorm room. What if the room you're sleeping in isn't just haunted, but wants you gone? At a university in Pennsylvania, Room 317 of an old dormitory was infamous for unexplained occurrences. Students whispered about strange noises, flickering lights, and shadowy figures lingering in the corners. Emma, a skeptical freshman, was unfazed by the rumors when she moved in. On her first night, Emma woke up to the sound of faint scratching. Groggy, she assumed it was just mice and went back to sleep. The next morning, she noticed long, jagged scratches on her desk. That evening, as she was studying, the room suddenly turned icy cold. Her breath fogged in front of her, and the lights flickered. Then, the desk chair began to spin on its own. Emma froze, unable to believe what she was seeing. Mustering courage, she whispered, "Who's there?" The chair stopped abruptly, and the room fell silent. But just as she started to relax, the words "Get out" appeared in condensation on the mirror. Terrified, Emma fled to her RA and demanded a room change. Weeks later, the new occupant of room 317 reported hearing whispers in the night and seeing shadowy figures in the mirror. Would you stay one night in room 317, knowing what Emma experienced? The disappearing hiker. What if the forest you're hiking in holds more than just trees? The dense forests of the Pacific Northwest are a paradise for nature lovers and a breeding ground for eerie legends. David, an experienced backpacker, set out on a solo hike, planning to traverse a remote trail known for its scenic beauty and treacherous terrain. It was supposed to be a routine trip, but it became the most harrowing experience of his life. On the second day, David noticed a strange silence enveloping the forest. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves were gone. As he walked, he caught glimpses of shadowy figures flitting between the trees. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but the sense of being watched grew stronger. When night fell, David set up camp and tried to sleep, but the shadows didn't leave him alone. He woke up to the sound of whispers and the feeling of cold breath on his face. Bolting upright, he shone his flashlight around the tent, but there was no one there. In the morning, he found strange footprints circling his campsite. Desperate to leave, he tried to follow his GPS, but it led him in endless circles. After 2 days of being hopelessly lost, search parties found him delirious and covered in scratches. His GPS showed a straight path back to civilization, but David insists that the Watchers led him astray. Would you ever hike that trail knowing what David went through? The Cursed Doll of Savannah. What if a doll you tried to throw away kept coming back? Savannah, Georgia, is steeped in history and haunted by countless tales of the supernatural. One of the most chilling stories centers on a porcelain doll owned by the Harper family. The doll, with its eerie glass eyes and delicate features, was a gift from a distant relative. From the moment it entered their home, strange things began happening. Doors slammed on their own, Lights flickered, and objects moved inexplicably. Mrs. Harper dismissed it as coincidence until the night she woke up to find the doll sitting at the foot of her bed, its head tilted as if watching her. The family tried to get rid of the doll, throwing it into a dumpster miles away. But the next morning, it was back on their porch, pristine and smiling. Desperate, they buried it in a remote location and left Savannah altogether. Locals claim that if you walk through the woods at night, you can still hear the faint sound of a child's laughter. Would you dare own a doll knowing it might never let you go? The Vanishing Woman of the London Underground. What if the person sitting across from you on the subway just disappears? Late one night, Tom boarded the last train on the London Underground. The carriage was eerily empty except for an elderly woman sitting across from him. She wore a long coat and a scarf that partially obscured her face. She never looked up, her hands folded neatly in her lap. At the next stop, the doors opened, but no one got on or off. Tom glanced back at the woman, only to find that she was gone. There had been no sound, no movement. She had simply vanished. Shaken, Tom mentioned the incident to a station attendant the next day. The attendant's face turned pale. "You're not the first," he said. "People have been seeing her for decades. They say she's the ghost of a woman who fell onto the tracks years ago. Would you still take that last train, knowing she might be there?" The silent room at the old asylum. What if a room could trap you in silence, and whispers were your only escape? In a small town in upstate New York, an abandoned asylum is a popular destination for urban explorers. Few, however, dare enter the silent room, where no sound penetrates. Jake and his friends, thrill seekers to the core, decided to test the legend. As they stood in the room, an oppressive silence enveloped them. It was as if the very air had been sucked out. Jake's ears rang from the absence of sound. Suddenly, he felt a cold hand grip his shoulder. Whipping around, he saw no one. Then the whispers began, soft at first, then louder and more frantic. "Get out! Get out!" The words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Panicking, they fled the asylum, the whispers chasing them into the night. Would you step into the silent room, knowing you might never hear silence the same way again? The poltergeist of the suburban home. What if your dream home became your worst nightmare? In a quiet suburb of Illinois, the Johnson family thought they'd found their dream home, until the strange occurrences began. Furniture moved on its own, strange knocking sounds echoed through the halls, and electronics flickered erratically. One evening, Mrs. Johnson saw a shadowy figure standing at the top of the stairs. She blinked, and it was gone. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, the family hired a paranormal investigator. Cameras captured footage of chairs sliding across the floor and lights turning on and off by themselves. After a tense night of monitoring, the investigator declared the house to be a hotspot for poltergeist activity. Unable to live with the constant terror, the Johnsons moved out. Would you stay in a house haunted by a poltergeist? The possessed painting of New Orleans. Imagine walking through an art gallery and feeling eyes following your every move. What if those eyes belonged to a painting with a sinister past? In a French Quarter art gallery, a disturbing painting hung on the wall, a dark figure with glowing eyes that seemed to follow visitors around the room. Many claimed to feel uneasy in its presence, and some even fainted. The gallery owner dismissed the claims until the night she witnessed the painting fall off the wall despite being securely mounted. Security footage later showed the figure in the painting shifting, its eyes glinting ominously. Desperate to rid herself of the cursed artwork, the owner sold it to a private collector. But rumors persist that the painting continues to torment its new owner. Next time you walk into an art gallery, take a closer look at the paintings. What if they're looking back at you? The ghostly pianist of the Grand Hotel. What would you do if you heard hauntingly beautiful music coming from a piano that hasn't been played in years? The Grand Hotel in Michigan is a luxurious retreat and a hotspot for paranormal activity. Guests frequently report hearing piano music in the empty ballroom. One evening, Lisa, a curious guest, decided to investigate. As she entered the ballroom, she saw a man in a tuxedo seated at the piano, his fingers gliding over the keys. The haunting melody filled the room. "Beautiful," she whispered, stepping closer. The music abruptly stopped. The man turned to face her, and then vanished into thin air. Hotel staff confirmed that the piano had been locked for years. Would you dare to listen to a song played by a ghost? The unseen passenger. Have you ever shared a ride without knowing who or what was sitting behind you? A taxi driver in Tokyo picked up a young woman late at night. She gave him an address and sat silently throughout the ride. Her face was pale, and her hands clutched a small bag. When they arrived, the driver turned to inform her of the fare, but the back seat was empty. Shocked, he checked his dash cam footage. The video showed the woman entering the car, but she never appeared on the footage again after they began driving. Locals believe she was the spirit of a woman who had died in an accident at that very intersection. The next time you catch a late-night ride, remember, you might not be the only passenger. The whispering shadows. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you were completely alone? Tonight, you'll hear the chilling story of a man who realized he was never truly by himself. Jacob moved into an old Victorian house nestled in the woods. He loved the peace and quiet, but soon that peace turned into unease. It started with faint whispers at night, too indistinct to understand but impossible to ignore. At first, he chalked it up to creaking wood in his imagination. As days turned into weeks, the activity escalated. Doors creaked open on their own, and lights flickered without warning. Jacob began to notice cold spots in various corners of the house, as if unseen presences were brushing past him. One evening, as he sat in his dimly lit living room, the whispers grew louder, transforming into an unsettling chorus echoing from the shadows. Jacob grabbed a flashlight and began searching room by room, but every corner was empty. Exhausted and on edge, he decided to confront the source directly. The basement seemed like the most likely place for the strange happenings. With trembling hands, he descended the creaky stairs. The air was damp, and the smell of mold was suffocating. As Jacob scanned the room with his flashlight, he noticed claw marks on the walls. Heart racing, he whispered, "Is someone here?" A sudden gust of wind extinguished his flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. Panic set in as Jacob fumbled to turn it back on. When the beam of light finally pierced the gloom, it revealed a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the basement. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. The figure had no discernible features, just a mass of darkness with glowing red eyes. "Leave!" it growled, the voice reverberating through the room. Jacob stumbled backward, tripping over an old box. Desperate, he scrambled up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind him. His hands shook as he bolted it shut. The following night, he awoke to the sensation of cold breath against his ear and a voice whispering, "Leave now." His heart pounded and sweat slicked his skin. Determined not to be intimidated, Jacob decided to set up cameras throughout the house. What he saw in the footage froze his blood. Shadowy figures creeping along the walls, faces distorted in silent screams. They weren't reflections or tricks of the light. They were there, moving with purpose. Desperation drove Jacob to seek help. He contacted a paranormal investigator who agreed to cleanse the house. The investigator performed rituals, burning sage and chanting incantations. For a few nights, the house remained eerily quiet. Jacob thought the nightmare was over until one stormy night. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The walls vibrated with an otherworldly energy. Shadowy hands emerged from the floor, grasping at his ankles. With a primal scream, Jacob broke free and ran to his car. As he sped down the dark road, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the figures standing at the window, watching him leave. They say the house is still there, and the shadows still whisper to anyone brave enough to enter. The locked room. Imagine discovering a locked room in your own home, a room you never knew existed. Would you dare open it? Emma and her husband recently bought an old farmhouse. As they were renovating, they stumbled upon a hidden door sealed with rusted chains. Curiosity gnawed at Emma until she convinced her husband to break the lock. The room was dark, filled with dust and decaying furniture. But what caught Emma's eye was a single rocking chair, gently moving on its own. She dismissed it as a draft and continued exploring. As the days passed, strange occurrences became routine. Objects moved on their own, and the air inside the house grew thick with an oppressive energy. Emma began hearing faint whispers coming from the locked room. One evening, unable to resist her curiosity, Emma entered the room again. The rocking chair was now facing the doorway, creaking louder than before. On the wall, scratch marks formed words. "This is my room. Leave." Terrified, Emma backed out and slammed the door shut. That night, she was jolted awake by a loud thud. She crept down the hallway and gasped. The locked room's door was wide open. She swore they had sealed it back. Inside, the chair creaked ominously. A shadowy figure with glowing eyes sat in it, watching her. "Why did you come back?" it hissed. Emma ran back to her bedroom and locked the door. The next morning, they sealed the room for good. But every night, they still hear the chair creaking and that same voice echoing through the walls. Desperate for a solution, Emma contacted a local historian who revealed the dark history of the house. A previous owner had gone mad and locked himself in that very room, claiming shadowy figures tormented him. He was never seen again. The historian provided instructions for a ritual to banish the entity. Armed with candles, salt, and courage, Emma and her husband entered the room one last time. They chanted the incantation, and the air vibrated with energy. The shadowy figure shrieked and dissolved into a cloud of black smoke. The oppressive energy lifted, and the room fell silent. Some rooms are better left locked. If only Emma had known. If only the forgotten asylum. What would you do if you found yourself trapped in a place with a dark past? A place that refuses to let you leave? Darren and his friends were urban explorers looking for their next thrill. They decided to investigate an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. The building stood tall, its windows shattered and walls covered in ivy. As they ventured inside, the air grew thick with the stench of decay. Graffiti lined the walls, but it was the unsettling messages, "Help us," "They watch," that made Darren's skin crawl. Exploring the labyrinthine hallways, they heard faint sobbing echoing through the halls. Following the sound, they stumbled upon a small padded room. A figure stood in the corner, facing the wall. "Hello?" Darren called out. The figure twisted its head unnaturally, revealing hollow eyes and a wide grin. Panic gripped them as the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Screams filled the air as shadows swirled around them. They sprinted toward the exit, but the asylum seemed to shift, elongating the hallways. Somehow they made it out, gasping for breath. But as Darren looked back, he saw the figure standing at the window grinning. The asylum may be abandoned, but its horrors are alive, waiting for their next visitors. The haunted shadows of Raven Hollow. On a foggy autumn night, a group of 5 friends, Emma, Liam, Sophie, Daniel, and Claire, decided to spend the weekend at an old Victorian mansion in the secluded woods of Raven Hollow. The mansion was infamous for its chilling history. Legend had it that in the late 1800s, the original owner, Victor Grimsby, conducted dark rituals that opened a portal to another realm. Since then, strange occurrences plagued the house. Flickering lights, whispers in empty rooms, and ghostly apparitions. The friends were thrill seekers, excited to debunk the mansion's haunted reputation. They laughed off the ghost stories and brought along camping gear, flashlights, and cameras to document their adventure. The mansion loomed ahead, shrouded in thick vines and decay. Its windows were dark voids, and the creaky front door seemed to groan as they pushed it open. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of mildew and something far more sinister. As they explored the dusty halls, their laughter echoed eerily. Portraits of grim-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seemingly following the intruders. "Creepy," Sophie muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just old paintings," Daniel scoffed. "Nothing to be scared of." But Emma felt uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching them. As night fell, they set up their sleeping bags in the grand living room. A fire crackled in the ancient hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. "Let's tell ghost stories," Liam suggested, grinning mischievously. They shared spooky tales, but their laughter was cut short when the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath became visible in the frigid air. "What the hell?" Claire whispered, shivering. Suddenly, the fire extinguished itself, plunging the room into darkness. Emma fumbled for her flashlight and shone it around. The beam caught a figure standing in the doorway, a woman in a tattered black dress, her face obscured by long, tangled hair. "Who's there?" Liam demanded, his voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it floated toward them, its feet not touching the ground. Sophie screamed, and the friends scattered, fleeing in different directions. Emma and Daniel found themselves in the basement, a labyrinth of stone walls and rusted machinery. Their flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows. "We need to get back upstairs," Daniel said urgently. But as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut on its own. The walls began to vibrate, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the basement. "What is that?" Emma whispered. A pair of glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness. The creature let out a bone-chilling roar and lunged at them. They sprinted down the corridor, narrowly avoiding the beast. Daniel spotted a narrow passageway and pulled Emma inside. "I think we lost it," he gasped. But their relief was short-lived. Whispering voices surrounded them, growing louder and more aggressive. "Join us! Stay with us forever!" Meanwhile, Liam, Claire, and Sophie were trapped on the second floor. The walls oozed dark liquid, and disembodied hands clawed at their clothes. "We have to get out of here!" Claire cried. They kicked open a door and stumbled into a lavish bedroom. A massive four-poster bed dominated the room, but it was the figure seated on the bed that froze them in their tracks. Victor Grimsby himself, or rather his spectral form, glared at them with hollow eyes. "You dare enter my domain?" he thundered. The friends backed away, but the door slammed shut. The windows shattered, and a whirlwind of ghostly figures filled the room. Reunited in the grand hall, the friends knew they had to end the nightmare. "The portal," Emma said breathlessly. "We need to find it and close it." Following Emma's instincts, they located a hidden door behind a tapestry. It led to a chamber pulsating with dark energy. In the center was a swirling vortex of shadows. Victor Grimsby appeared, his form more monstrous than ever. "You will not undo my work," he roared. Summoning their courage, the friends formed a circle and recited an incantation Emma had found in an old journal. The vortex shrieked and began to collapse. The spirits wailed as they were sucked into the void. Grimsby let out one final agonizing scream before disintegrating into ash. The mansion trembled, then fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene calm. "Is it over?" Sophie asked cautiously. Emma nodded. "I think we did it." As dawn broke, they emerged from the mansion, battered but alive. The nightmare was over, but they knew they would carry the scars forever. They thought they had escaped the darkness, but some doors, once open, are never truly closed, and sometimes the shadows follow you home. The haunted manor of Blackwood Hollow. They say Blackwood Hollow is a place where the living and the dead walk side by side. Most locals refuse to even speak of the manor that sits on the edge of town, wrapped in eternal fog. Those who dared to enter never return the same. Tonight, I'll take you deep into that cursed place. But be warned, the shadows here have a story to tell, and they're waiting for someone to listen. It was a bitterly cold evening when Emma, Liam, and Natalie arrived at the gates of Blackwood Manor. The trio had heard countless rumors about the decrepit mansion, how it was cursed by a vengeful spirit, how doors slammed without warning, and whispers floated through the hallways when no one was there. But they weren't here for ghost stories. They were urban explorers, eager to capture footage of one of the most infamous haunted locations for their growing YouTube channel. The iron gates creaked open as Liam pushed against them, the sound echoing through the stillness of the night. Natalie shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. "Are we really doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emma, the fearless leader of the group, grinned. "Come on, Nat. Think of the views." They made their way up the overgrown path, the towering silhouette of the manor looming ahead. Its windows were dark, like empty eye sockets staring into their souls. Vines twisted around the crumbling walls, and the front door hung slightly ajar, as if beckoning them inside. The moment they stepped through the threshold, the temperature plummeted. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Liam pulled out his camera, the red recording light cutting through the darkness. "We're inside Blackwood Manor," he whispered. "This place is insane." Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. Natalie jumped, clutching Emma's arm. "What was that?" she whispered. Emma shook her head. Probably just the wind. But they all knew better. They ascended the grand staircase, each step groaning under their weight. At the top, a long hallway stretched before them, lined with doors that seemed to watch their every move. The air was thick with the scent of decay. As they moved deeper into the house, Liam paused, his camera focused on a door at the end of the hall. "Do you see that?" he asked. Emma and Natalie followed his gaze. The door was slowly opening on its own. They approached cautiously, hearts racing. Emma pushed the door open, revealing a dusty bedroom. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and a cracked mirror hung on the wall. The air felt heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then they saw it, a faint figure standing by the window. It was a woman in a tattered dress, her face obscured by shadow. She didn't move, didn't speak. Natalie let out a strangled gasp. "We need to get out of here." But Emma was already stepping forward, her curiosity overriding her fear. "Hello," she called. The figure turned its head slowly, revealing hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. A chilling scream filled the room, and the figure dissolved into thin air. Panic set in. The walls began to shake, and the sound of footsteps echoed from all directions. Doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. "Run!" Liam shouted. They bolted down the hallway, but the house seemed to twist and shift around them. Hallways stretched endlessly, and doors led to nowhere. Whispers filled the air, growing louder with each step. Out of the corner of her eye, Emma saw shadowy figures emerging from the walls. Their twisted forms reached out with claw-like hands. Natalie tripped and fell, screaming as one of the shadows loomed over her. Emma grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet. "We have to find the front door," Emma yelled. They sprinted down a staircase that hadn't been there before, the shadows close behind. The walls pulsed like a living organism, and the air was thick with the scent of burning wood. Finally, they saw it, the front door, just a few feet away. But standing in front of it was the same ghostly woman, her eyes blazing with fury. Liam raised his camera, his hands shaking. "What do you want from us?" he demanded. The woman let out a guttural growl, and the shadows surged forward. Emma grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and swung it at the ghostly figure. To her surprise, the figure shrieked and recoiled. "It's working," she shouted. "Get to the door." They pushed past the ghost, throwing open the door and stumbling into the night. The cold air hit them like a slap, and the oppressive weight of the house lifted. They didn't stop running until they reached their car. Panting and shaking, they piled inside. As Liam started the engine, Natalie glanced back at the manor. The windows glowed with an eerie light, and faint figures stood in the shadows, watching them. "We're never coming back here," Natalie whispered. Emma nodded, her face pale. "But we got the footage." Liam held up the camera, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Guys, the footage is gone." Silence filled the car as the realization sank in. Whatever haunted Blackwood Manor didn't want its secrets revealed, and it had made sure they never would. But just as they drove past the iron gates, the car radio crackled to life. A distorted voice whispered, "You can never leave." The engine sputtered, and the car ground to a halt. Their nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning.